Greetings! In our last two episodes, we looked at some TRS-80 Model 1 stuff, and make sure to watch those. I was recently fortunate enough to buy a boatload of TRS-80 Model 1 components, and the whole pleasure in that is going through the boxes of loose stuff that came with it. And today we're going to look at one of the gems I found in there. So what you're looking at is the Omikron Mapper II set of daughter boards that go into a TRS-80 Model 1. This goes into the CPU side, and this goes into the expansion interface floppy controller side. Now, what's the purpose of this board set? These boards enabled a TRS-80 Model 1 to run CP/M software. CP/M was an early disk operating system for 8-bit Intel processors, originally written for the Intel 8080, but later it got moved to support the Z80. And at the peak of its popularity, it supported about 3,000 different kinds of microcomputers. CP/M was invented and created by Gary Kildall in 1974, and it was basically just CP/M stands for a control program for microcomputers. And the idea was to create a shell operating system where you needed to have boot up code on the computer to be able to boot a floppy, and you also had to recompile CP/M for your specific machine and include the BIOS routines. So the requirements for CP/M were basically later on were a Z80 based machine, and what the manufacturer had to do was create something that booted off a ROM, bank switched the ROM out, and offered you up to 64K of RAM, covering the entire address space of a Z80. When you turned it on, the ROM, there were usually small ROMs, just enough to go and start booting CP/M off a floppy disk. But once you had done that, it was a great idea, because if the BIOS was included in your version of CP/M, anybody could write software for it and access your machine-specific features, displays, serial ports, printers, disks, whatever, through standardized BIOS calls, well, standardized in the parameters they needed and where the entry point was located. Very much like the IBM PC worked. And CP/M never properly got into bed with IBM. IBM used Microsoft's DOS and sold it separately for $40. They also sold CP/M 86, which was written for 86 type processors, but it cost $240, 6 times as much as Microsoft DOS. Needless to say, it didn't fare too well, and CP/M then faded into obscurity. But in its heyday, there were a lot of programs available, because the software publishers could just write a CP/M program using standard entry points, and theoretically and mostly practically, the software would run on anything that was CP/M compatible. So this board set makes a TRS-80 Model 1 CP/M compatible. And if we look at the boards, the board on the left is the one that plugs into the Z80 socket. And you remove the Z80, plug this in, and put the Z80 in here. Here's a boot ROM and associated nickel and dime logic that puts up a greeting message, lets you select, do you want CP/M or do you want a normal TRS-80? So when you select TRS-80, it banks out the ROM and just goes to the cold start in the TRS-80, and you have a normal TRS-80 running. If you click or select the CP/M option, in the TRS-80, RAM starts at hex address 4000, but CP/M wants to see RAM at address 0. So this relocates all of the RAM in a TRS-80 to location 0, and then boots a CP/M floppy, loading all of that into the RAM starting at location 0. In a nutshell, that's what this board does. This board goes into an expansion interface, and again you pull the floppy disk controller, plug this board into the empty socket, and put the floppy disk controller in here. What this does is it implements a data separator which greatly enhances the reliability of reading floppy disks, but it also supports 8-inch drives, which at the time, 1980, when this came out, there were a lot of microcomputers out there that utilized 8-inch floppy drives, and this allowed you to easily interchange files between whatever computer you had with 8-inch drives and the TRS-80. So let's find out if this works. We have to install this. I have chosen a pair of candidates, TRS-80 computer itself that this goes into, and an expansion interface that this goes into. And it's actually pretty simple. I found a manual for it, and it's pretty clear on how to install this. So let's get started. Here's the host, another recently acquired component. It's a level 2 with 16K RAM installed, and let's take her apart. Alright, so we have to remove the Z80, which is sitting right here. Then plug this in. Oh, it's got a bent pin. Can you see that right there in the lower corner here? So let me straighten the bent pin. That's bent pretty badly, actually. And now it isn't bent anymore. So now we need to align the socket okay, and press down firmly. I should have probably inserted the Z80 before, but we shall do that now. And that's all we need to do to install the board. We do have this wire hanging off here that needs to be connected to the disk controller, the mapper, and it just says that this wire is necessary if you're going to drive 8-inch drives. And then that's it. So now what we can do is we can test it. Just make sure that our install is okay, see if it runs, if the board comes up, and if it runs in TRS-80 mode. But in order to test the CP/M, we're going to have to go to a system with an expansion interface and floppy drives. But let's first see if the CPU works. But before we go on, I want to point out something that I deem as a sincere implementation deficiency on the TRS-80, and that is how you connect power, video, and the cassette port to it. And the problem I have with it is, here is this the power plug? Yes, which I have clearly labeled. This is the power plug, a 5-pin DIN connector. Here's a video plug that is a 5-pin DIN connector, and I don't have it handy, but the cassette tape connector is also a 5-pin DIN plug. So you can already imagine what I'm getting at. The power connector fits perfectly into all three of the connectors over here. So does the video, and so does the cassette. So what happens if you make a mistake, you take power connector and you plug it into the video connector? Well, you blow out the video circuitry on the TRS-80. Would it have been that hard to use a different plug, a 6-pin for power, a 5-pin for the video, or something like that? I mean, the 11 cents they saved by going to 3 identical DIN 5s probably did not pay off in the number of warranty repairs Radio Shack had to perform of people who plugged the power into the video. But that's just a personal gripe. So we'll plug it in and see if it comes up. Okay, everything is plugged in correctly over here. We got the Omikron board installed, so let's turn it on and see what happens. Okay, Omikron Systems, copyright 81, Mapper CP/M adapter, version A.0. And that matches, the A matches the boot ROM that's on the board. And we have two options, C for CP/M and T for TRS-80. The C we can't try out yet because it's going to go out and try to load stuff off a floppy disk, and for that I have to put together a floppy system. But the T is a TRS-80, and it simply bank switches out the Omikron ROM and logic and just lets this run like a TRS-80. So let's hit the T, and we see the regular mem size prompt. Hit enter and see how much memory it sees. And everything seems to be running okay. Now, when we reset this, we're going to try hitting the C, but nothing happens because it's probably sitting in an endless wait loop trying to read a floppy, which it can't. And we can prove that by hitting the T, which worked before, but now it's not working because this thing is is busy with other things. So let's start putting together a system with floppies. This guy's all assembled and still works, but we we have to put in the second board from the mapper into the expansion interface. And here's an expansion interface. Now technically we don't need the second board to test if the mapper works, but since it has a data separator on it, we will get more reliable floppy reads, and I do not have an 8-inch drive to test that, and frankly that's not really high on my priorities list, but let's install the second board in here and see if it works. Here's the inside. The big 32K of RAM expansion over here, and the floppy controller is here. And here's the board. I made myself directions of where the clip needs to be connected to. It's a signal that doesn't appear on the floppy controller. So let's take it out. Properly oriented in the socket. Check the pins. And again we have bent pins. On this guy. Okay. And we just put it oriented the same way. That the floppy chip was in there. And I need some light because I cannot see the pins. Let's see. I think I guided them correctly. Click. And then, whoa, does this reach? Yeah, it does. So we connect this to Z22. That just barely reaches. Oh, it's kind of Mickey Mouse, but anyway, okay, let's put this back together and get started on our integrate everything into the floppy system and see if it actually works. Okay, I got to switch to handheld mode here to show everything. Here's a test setup. TRS-80 CPU, expansion interface with a monitor, and a grand total of 4 disk drives on here. So let's turn it on. And let's first test TRS-DOS to make sure that the disk controller in there works correctly. So good, it read that. And let's just spot check and put a disk into the last drive in the chain. And see if we can read that one. And yep, it read it. So the disk interface is okay, and everything seems to have worked out with normal DOS. So now for the big test. This floppy came in the, and I got probably over 100 floppies with my with the buy I did on these. It looks like it's an original disc, but your guess is as good as mine. I did put my special Ride Protect tabs on it because it didn't have one, which seems kind of dangerous. So let's take this disc. Doesn't even want to go in. And we go back to the screen, reset, and hit C. And there you go. We have booted into CPM version 2.2. Okay, now there's a whole bunch of things we can do with it, but the only thing I do want to do is see if it is able to read another disk drive. Now the problem, which I haven't figured out yet, is for some reason it does insist on drives 0 and 1 on the left two ones, that those be 5 1/4 inch drives, but it wants the other two to be 8-inch drives. And I'm sure there's a configuration thing in here where I can fix that. But for now, we're gonna only be able to test this drive. And what we're gonna do, I don't even know if that floppy's any good, but we're gonna do a dir b:. Well, looks like it can't read that. BDOS error. I can't get out of it. It gets, oh yeah, I can. Okay, let's see if I can dig out another CPM disk. Because obviously that disk's bad. Well, we'll find out in a minute. So again, there you go, I read it. So yes, that disc, the first disc I put in is obviously bad. But everything is in here. And we got CPM running on this thing. Hours and hours and hours of fun await us. But I think we've had enough fun for today. Well, with all that excitement, it's time to take a breather. But I do have a request from you, my illustrious viewership, for something I need. I need a 5 1/4 inch floppy. But wait. Not one like this. I have tons of these. But what I need is, these are soft sectored. And I need hard sectored ones. So what does that mean for the uninitiated? Soft sectored ones has a hole here. And there's a hole, one hole punched in the floppy media. So if you turn this thing, eventually the hole should show up. Hello, there it is. See that? There's a hole. So this controller uses that to know when the relative angle of the disk media with reference to the disk head, which sits here, is 0 degrees, or actually any arbitrary number. It's just a reference point. and that way it knows when to start reading, where the first sector is. Once it hits this, it knows, okay, I'm at the first sector, and then it just uses timing to find the other sectors. Now, a hard-sectored one has a total of 10 holes in the media. And the way you can tell is if you turn this, you will see other holes. You will see a total of 10 holes appear in the media as you turn this. The reason I need those is I got an interesting piece of vintage computing history that requires those, and I have been unable to find them. Everybody I asked immediately says, how many do you need, until I explained that I need hard sector disks, and nobody seems to have any, and I couldn't find any. So if you have any idea where I can buy some of them, let me know, and you will have my eternal gratefulness. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Oh, before I forget, before you suggest the DIY approach, I have seen an online DIY instructable where basically you have to open the floppy, the black sleeve, take out the media, make a jig that has got 10 equally spaced holes, and then punch the holes manually, and then put the media back into the black jacket, and glue the jacket shut again, and hope that you didn't corrupt the media because you didn't use a clean room to do this. That is not a solution I'm looking for. I would like to get the finished product.